What up, what up? This is Built Different Podcast featuring Ricky, CEO of Extropian, Sean Greener as always, Justin Kim, and Raul Gamboa representing one half of Core Media. Again, as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Want to shout out my friend Leonard Jackson with the intro beat again, Elementals Music. With that being said, we have a very amazing show for you guys today. A really cool topic, something that we find that's very cool to each one of us, and something that we're going to be discussing at various lengths today. So, with that being said, Raul, did you kind of want to kick us off and get us started here?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, let's kick things off with sort of what we're going to be talking about today, and we want to give a bunch of different sports a spotlight, if you will, where we can talk about them and have a discussion around the technology, the industry, and everything sort of surrounding that sport. This episode is surrounding a sport that the United States loves. I know I love it. I know we as a company love it. We have a fantasy league based on this sport. Of course, I'm talking about...
Let's not go too far into that.
Let's go.
Oh man, yeah. But of course, the sport I'm talking about is football. So, football is as popular as it gets in this country, and it's incredibly fun. I don't know. I kind of want to ask you guys: have any of you guys played football at any point in your lives?
I did. I played in 8th grade, and I broke my wrist in the first game of the season, so I was out for the rest of the season.
Oh no!
And I played in my first year of high school, but I didn't get to play much.
Yeah. What about you, Sean?
I thought about being a kicker, and then I realized I wasn't very good, and I didn't become a kicker. That was it.
I mean, you could still do it one day, you know. If you apply
I'm very good at flag football.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
a
variant.
flag football baller.
What about you, Ricky?
Yeah,
Did you ever play back in the day?
I played just for fun. I was always a super skinny kid, so I think in high school I was probably 130, 127. Leaving high school, going into college. So no, I didn't play, but I was always fast as hell. I think I would have been, really good at it. When I did play with friends and things like that, I would always kill it. So, something I kind of look back on, damn, I kind of wish I would have to see how I would have performed. But I don't know. I was kind of different in high school. I started working and wanting to buy things and girls and all that stuff. So I kind of, left football and sports alone and went into the working world early. So, that was.
Hey, that's fair.
If I could go back in time, I would like to do it though.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I'm a little bit like Justin. I played for a year in high school. It was fun. It's easy to get hurt, but it's that's part of the sport a little bit. I won't lie. But I kind of, just like the past couple of episodes, I have a bunch of questions about this sort of thing, and I know that the Extropian team has some answers. So they've had some topics, and we wanted to go over football and sort of, like I said, the tech, the data behind it. So I guess I kind of want to open up the floor to you guys in terms of data and football. So back in high school, I had no idea how any of that worked. They just told me to hit the guy in front of me. How does the professional and the collegiate level, how do things ramp up? How do we know about the numbers? What numbers matter?
Yeah. Sean, I don't know if you want to touch on that because or Justin as well, because I think you guys did quite a bit of research on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think the data portion of football is greatly advanced since back in the day it was just kind of like the eye test, like most sports were. You could see which players were the strongest, which players were the fastest, and try to make judgments based on that. But now you look at things like the NFL Combine. It's become a huge event where they're testing you physically and all these different things to try to figure out not only your straight line speed, which is important, but things like how quickly can you change directions, like
Hmm.
how good are your hands, how good are um, your like different movements. Are you able, like, you have good fluidity in your hips and stuff like that if you're a defensive player. So there's a lot more data that's being collected now, and then even within the games, there's uh, most teams now are, using analytics a little bit more, as far as decision making goes, and as far as, um, situational football. That, it used to just be, uh, like, whoever the coach was, they could be, an aggressive coach and like to go for it on fourth down, stuff like that, or they could be a conservative coach who, was like, I trust my defense, I trust my offense, whatever, I'll punt. Um, but now there's so much more that goes into it, and there's actual numbers behind, whether that decision is a statistically good decision or not. So I think that's a really cool thing that's been kind of that you've seen with data becoming more a part of the sport. What about you, Justin?
Well, I actually, I know I talked to Sean about this a little bit, and I think I sent the story to Ricky earlier today. But I was just here, I was reading, and I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, so I love this story. But
Uh,
yeah, tell us, Sean. So this, if you've seen the movie Moneyball, which has to do with like the analytics of baseball and how that was like revolutionized, there was something similar that kind of happened with football back in the 1960s. Because when back in the 1960s, if you can believe it, the Cowboys weren't that good, and so they had to figure out a way to like kind of revamp how they draft players. And I think this in the 60s is when they first got started, and they were a terrible team. I think they went like 0-11 or something like that. And at the time, IBM, the company, was helping use their technology to kind of revamp the Olympics. And I think the president of the Cowboys saw that and said, "Oh wow, they're using technology to revolutionize the sports and the Olympics. I wonder if they can help us make our team better, basically." And so they went to IBM, and they asked them for help and said, "Hey, is there anyone that could help us with like the analytics from our with the analytics for our team?" And so IBM assigned them a statistician whose name I might butcher. His name was A. Salam Qureshi. He was from India. He was an immigrant from India. He knew nothing about football whatsoever. And it was like, okay, well, let's see what this guy can do. And basically, what he did was he had to they wanted him to help quantify what exactly are the best things to look for when drafting a player. Because before he came along, it was essentially just like, scouts would say things like, "Oh, this player is strong as an ox," which is, I mean, how do you quantify that? And so, yeah, exactly. There was different, like scouts would say all sorts of things that kind of weren't really useful, or you couldn't really pull like a number to that. And so he essentially, the statistician, created like a model that took all of those things into account, and he narrowed it down to like 5 or 6 different variables. I think it was things like alertness, competitiveness, and then like your height and your weight, things like that. And they basically, from what I remember reading, they first used it like as in like a mock draft, like a mock NFL draft in 1964, 1965, and they ended up selecting players like Dick Butkus and Roger Staubach, which, if you guys don't know, those are like really big names. So the model was like pretty amazing at selecting players, because on top of that, it was also selecting players from like smaller schools. They were even using it on like basketball players, bringing basketball players into the Cowboys, and so they were able to find a lot of really like hidden gems, essentially, kind of like the story in Moneyball. And then essentially, the Cowboys went on to have, I believe it was 20 winning seasons in a row, or they went to the playoffs 20 seasons in a row using this analytics model, and that led to them becoming a dynasty and winning 5 Super Bowls. So that's how the Cowboys kind of used analytics, and I can't believe I've never heard of this story before. Honestly, I feel like we
Yeah.
should do like a person of the week's post about the analytics guy for the Cowboys, because it's pretty unbelievable what he did.
Yeah, I had never heard that story before, and in football, you have all these NFL films, documentaries, and going back to the early years of football, and this story was never present, especially for a storied franchise like the Cowboys and the success they had back then. That they this was
When they came
never
back.
this was never this was never talked about. Like that's really surprising. So when you sent me that article, I was actually pretty shocked. I was like, I'd never heard this before, but he deserves a lot of credit for even the advances that have happened now. He was kind of the godfather of it, I would say. Maybe there's somebody else out there we never heard about for another team, but a team as big as the Cowboys is surprising that you never heard of it.
I think it's.
Yeah,
I
and I
mean,
mean, I
essentially it's because of him. That's why they're so big. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
and I mean, I'm a huge fan of Moneyball, and I think a lot of people have heard that story in the
Mhm.
baseball analytics side, and yeah, I had no clue as well about the story that Justin was mentioning until he showed it to me, and I was like, what is this? Is this some like Cowboys propaganda? But I was like, no, this is like a legit thing. Um, and I think it's super cool as well. The fact that you can find people, and you see it every year now. Some teams are just really good at finding those like hidden gems, those guys who are
Hmm.
undervalued, who, whether it's because they're from a small school or whether it's because they didn't play a lot because of injuries or something like that. There's so many players that just gonna go under the radar, and yeah, the fact that the Cowboys were kind of using analytics and like technology to find those people, I think is they were way ahead of their time. They're ahead of some teams even now, to be honest.
The '60s, that's crazy back then. Yeah, because those stories of these hidden gems, I mean, those are my favorites from the NFL. Like these guys that people didn't hear about, or they're not highly recruited, and they come out and they have a amazing career in the NFL. I mean, I guess you could point to Brady. He went to a big school, but I mean, the most successful player of all time that was underdrafted. But yeah, though that's pretty amazing. But these teams have that guy to thank, essentially for finding these guys.
Yeah,
I mean, if
totally.
if, if their draft analytics thing took into account competitiveness, I feel like you got to put Brady as like a 99 on the competitiveness scale.
Mhm.
Uh, excuse me. I don't know if I don't know if he was the same guy back then. No, I don't know. Like if you could have quantified that at Michigan, I don't know if he, because you see, obviously we didn't all pay attention to him like we do now, but even back then, his draft analysis and his videos and everything, he didn't look the confident player that he is now. Like I don't know if there was a transition that happened when he got into the NFL or what, but that would be interesting to kind of in retrospect go back and look at.
It is crazy to think about still, like how much, even today, like what kind of hidden gems kind of just go like through past the first round, like they don't even get drafted, like Tom Brady's a great
Hmm.
example, or like Antonio Brown, who before he's, the way he is now, but when he was on Pittsburgh, he was like the best receiver in the league, and I think he got drafted what in the fifth round or something like that. And it's crazy
Yeah,
how many hidden gems you can still find, like even today. Like sometimes the analytics, players still slip through somehow. It's crazy.
be careful, man. Antonio Brown will come after you on social media.
And
Yeah.
and
At
one
this,
thing that I've heard is a reason for guys falling before, and this kind of plays into that competitiveness thing. Is like sometimes players are like questioned on whether they actually have like the strong desire to play football at the highest level and be
Hmm.
like the best player they can be. I know that was I don't know why it was a question, but it was a question with Michael Parsons, who Justin obviously loves. They were like, oh, like does does he really want it as much as like because he some guys sat out for that COVID season and
Yeah,
um obviously we see now he does want it and he's amazing and I every team
he
that's
doesn't want
drafted
it. He
above
needs
them,
it.
yeah, every team that's drafted above that is man, I wish I had him instead. But
But it also I also wanted to bring up the question as well. Like, does it? And this is something I always struggle with after the draft is like the fit with the team. Because sometimes you do see guys going to have success with another team. It's not as often that somebody gets traded and they, outperform, have a better performance than they did for the team that drafted them. But like, how much is it like the scheme? How much is it like them not being a fit? How much is it maybe not that coaching staff not getting the most out of that player? And then the second part of that is, do you think the analytics can do you think the analytics are going to get to a point where teams recognize that and teams can put a player in the best position to be a success?
I'm trying to
that's
think
a
of a
great
player that
question.
would fit like what you're talking about. The only one that I could really think of off the top of my head is Jared Goff, who he was the first overall pick, and like he wasn't doing too great in for the Rams for a while. And then Sean McVay came to town, and then all of a sudden they go to the Super Bowl like 2 years later. It's I feel like that was like a coaching situation kind of, because I don't know if the roster
Hmm.
changed too much in between in those years.
I think it's actually easier to point out situations where somebody wasn't a scheme fit, like where you saw like big free
Hmm.
agent signing who's like, oh, like this guy's gonna be amazing, and then never really lived up to the hype. I think that happens a lot more often because some of these teams, whether it's, you know, they want to obviously compete for a Super Bowl, so the top free agent wide receiver, the top free agent quarterback, they pay him all this money to come in, and they're like, oh, this is gonna be the guy, and then the guy doesn't live up to the hype. He's for whatever reason, and um, I mean, I don't know how much of this is on the player so much, but we've seen it this year with a guy like Russell Wilson. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Seattle for years, and it was like he went to the Broncos. Everyone thought he was going to be amazing, and then he has not been amazing. I can say that for sure from my fantasy team not being super happy. But
Me too.
uh, yeah, but so it's like it's almost not so much of like I mean, when someone is a good scheme fit, you can tell. And like there's situations like I think Derrick Henry with the Titans is a good example. Nobody knew that Derrick Henry could be that good, but when he's in a system where the offensive line is a bunch of, guys who are gonna like crank out like some yards and give him some space to run and then he can run downhill and the whole offense is built around that strength, then I think that's going to be what helps a guy succeed. While as sometimes teams will get a guy who is uber talented but might not fit the scheme as well, and he's running like I see a lot of stats now where it's like they can actually evaluate how a player is on outside runs versus inside runs, and like
Hmm.
some teams do really well at blocking for outside running lanes. But if the running back isn't an outside runner, if he's like an in between the tackles runner, then it's not going to work. The guy's going to be less successful than he would be on another team. So I think the analytics should definitely help um, teams kind of recognize people who are not good scheme fits.
Not
Do
just
you, do you
people
think
who are.
do you,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was going to ask, pivot off of what John just said. Do you think there? Do you think that it's going to get? It's obviously going to get better in your opinion with more data, right? Because right now, I don't think they're there yet. Where you're still seeing the guys fall through the cracks and not getting to the right system, and teams, not being utilizing the guy correctly. So, in your opinion, with more data and more advancements in technology, that gap should start getting a little smaller, right?
I think
I would
so. I think team. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just gonna say I think so. I think teams are slowly starting to realize like how important like that amount, how important data is to their teams. Even though like the what I was talking about with the Cowboys, that was what 50, 60 years ago. Some teams, I guess, are just very slow to adopt the analytics of it of drafting players. Of they still kind of believe in the or the eye test, and they think that they can just sort of select players based on a gut feeling and stuff. And I mean, that doesn't really work out a lot of the time. But I think now that teams are starting to see like, okay, wow, like this was not a good draft, this was not a good player selection. It's like they don't. It's almost like I feel like they don't have a choice anymore. They have to adapt or die, basically.
And yeah, just to piggyback off of what Justin said, I think the biggest thing with that is the data's there. It's available. People can use it. Do the teams and do the decision makers within teams trust the data? If they have trust in the data and believe that it can help them succeed, then I think it's useful. But if the data's there and teams are just not using it, or they're like they're getting the data and they're just like, like we're gonna do our own thing, like we're not gonna listen to what all the data's telling us, then it's useless. It's not gonna help you or the players or anyone. So
yeah. Sorry, Ro.
No, yeah, I agree with what all of you guys are saying, and not only does it help teams select for the right players and the right players that fit into their system, but also the right plays, right? Where you can do the math on what routes are most successful against what matchups and what situations. There's already, of course, at the professional level that already gets done. But the more that we can involve technology and sort of these predictive forces, machine learning, I think that you can get a lot out of professional players when you're giving them the right tools, you're giving them the right plays that are actually going to work. Just on top of what you guys have been saying in terms of like drafting the right players and getting the right players on your team, it's also getting them to win games, essentially.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in terms of winning games, have you guys seen anything about the metrics and the probabilities and the data behind winning games and scoring points in football?
Like a predictive analytics, predictive analysis. Yeah, I think that's becoming more and more a part of the game. You kind of see it in betting lines. You see it with our fantasy football. Unfortunately, like I said, I hate looking at that because like by the end of like 4 o'clock, I'm like 27% to whatever percent, and it drives me nuts. But yeah, so besides my unfortunate series of events that have been occurring with fantasy football, no, I think it's cool. I'm not a betting man, but I know a lot of people that are into betting, and it helps them kind of determine what they want to do, where they want to place their money. As a fan, it's a talking point. I'm sure it's a sign of encouragement for teams as well when you see that there's this predictive number behind if you're going to win or lose a game. It can light a fire under a team, but I think it's becoming more and more a part of the game. I think everything that encompasses these analytics and all of the data that they're collecting and past history, I think it's playing a lot into the sport as a whole, and it could go also into the game plan. Previous history and the data that accompanies it could help a team make some different decisions when they play that division rival, that second game, or that next season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very interesting the way the probabilities work because like Ricky said, going for two is now something that people do more often. Like there's been a couple games this year where the team scores the first touchdown, and with no other reasoning other than the analytics, they go for two. Like not because they're kicked. Like before, it's been like, oh, our kicker was injured, like or it's like super bad conditions. We don't want to try to kick the ball. Now it's like teams are just like, oh well, if we get 2 points here, then the other team is now behind 8 points instead of 7. It's like it's a strategy thing more so than like a necessary thing that they have to do. Like they're doing it because they think it's the best strategy. And I think it's interesting because even this year alone, we've seen the positives and negatives of that. There was a game earlier in the year where the Baltimore Ravens did not kick a field goal when they could have, and they were tied with the other team. They didn't kick the field goal. They went for it on fourth down because they knew if they got the fourth down, they would win the game. They didn't get the fourth down. The other team went down and scored and won the game. So, there's a negative to it. It could any risk. All of these going for it situations are a risk. You can either play safe or take a risk, and teams are gonna do what they want, whether it's on either side of that coin. But ultimately, I think I've seen a lot more situations where the risk has actually benefited the team that took it because they had trust in the analytics and they had trust in the numbers than the other way around where it worked against them.
Yes, those teams are those teams are like playing to win, not necessarily playing to lose. I think that's what the Cowboys' problem was for a long time, is we were always playing not to lose, and we ended up losing. So it's true. It's interesting seeing how the analytics kind of makes you see like the bet. This is the time to take a risk. It's a calculated risk, but I mean, you got to play to win the game. You can't just play it safe too often. And the teams that do that, they typically don't make it to February in a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and then I think you saw it in college football this past weekend with Bama and LSU going for two, and it won them the game, and could cost Alabama a run in the championship for the first time in years. I think since 2016. But yeah, some of the decisions being made though too, I do not understand them. I'd be interested to see the analytics and the process that the process to which they decided to make that decision, because I think I saw a game like last week or the week before where they were on their side of the field going for it on 4th and 2, and it's just like, this doesn't make any sense. It had no At that point in time, it wasn't like they had to go for it all at that point, because it was early in the game and the game wasn't out of hand or anything. So that side of it's interesting to me as well. And the other part that I think is very interesting too is now the broadcast networks are in tune with, like, hey, should you go for this or should you not go for it? Because you hear a lot of time the commentators said, going based off of, I guess the NFL has, or teams have this whole list of situations where you go for it and where you don't go for it, or punt versus go for it on fourth down. And it's kind of a rule book a lot of teams go by, and I guess they kind of adapt from there. But, you hear the announcers kind of analyzing it, and especially Tony Romo's a big proponent of it. But, hey, this guy should have went for it, or hey, this guy should have gone, this team should have went for it. Hey, I don't know why they went for it in this situation. So it's also interesting that now the commentary teams and fans are in tune with some of the decision making that goes into why teams go for it or they don't, and when they should or when they shouldn't.
Yeah, Ricky, that's right on the money. You guys have talked about how we use data to get the right players. In football, we've talked about how people use data to win games or lose them sometimes. I also wanted to ask you guys about how data can maybe keep football players safe, and sort of what your thoughts are around that, and how to keep this sport alive and healthy and sort of far into the future.
I think that part of what's crazy, and goes back to what Sean was saying about the combine, is the size, strength, and weight component of the sport now, where these bigger guys are faster than the guys that were smaller back in the day. Like, athletes are becoming stronger, they're becoming faster. They're doing they're doing the right regimens and taking the right supplements and things like that to just
you could almost say they're
beasts.
redefining what's possible.
Just like our company, like Extropian. Thanks for sliding that in, Ro. But yeah, on the other side of that too is as fast and big and fast and strong as they get. That the bigger and faster and stronger that they're getting, the more collisions and kind of harmful things happen to them. A lot more head impact injuries and things of that nature. So um, I'm very interested in a lot of things the NFL is doing lately, and I've seen, part of my email list is getting, feedback on new sports tech initiatives and calls to action. And NFL every year does have events that are about finding solutions to head impacts and making the helmet safer and also, too, I think on the other side of that is there's recovery data that they're getting from these athletes as well to reduce the risk of injuries. But it's kind of like a delicate balance though, because like while you're getting bigger, stronger, faster, more explosive, we're seeing more, ACL tears and the soft tissue injuries and all these things. So I think while we're using these new ways of training, new, data's more present. I think this, it needs to kind of balance each other out because, yeah, you're getting stronger, but I think there's more injuries. I'm noticing more injuries than I did in the past few years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if if you didn't check out our podcast last week, Concussions 101, great episode. We talked about a little bit about, what goes into getting a concussion, how it makes you feel. I shared a little bit of my story with some of my concussions, so feel free to check that out. But yeah, no, I mean, concussions are, it's a risk that, any sport you can get a concussion. Of all the ones that I got, none of them were from football. Despite, everyone always saying, not everyone, but, some people saying that football is a common place to get a concussion, as far as sports go. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Ricky that the NFL is doing a lot of things better to try to prevent that. They're implementing new rules, and I think new helmet technology has been another thing that they're trying to make helmets where it's not so much as it's more protective of the head and neck area, and then also less dangerous for people to use. Like if people were to people aren't allowed to use their helmet to make contact with someone anymore. You can't use it essentially like a weapon. And I think that those changes are going to be really big. But touching on one of the other things that Ricky said about the athletes getting bigger and faster and stronger, I always am blown away when I'm watching the combine and there's some 350-pound guy, and I'm like, okay, that guy's huge, and then he runs the 40 and would beat my time by 3 seconds, and I'm like, man, I need to get in shape, what the heck. But yeah, it's very impressive, the amount of training that these guys do and the level of athleticism that they have. But I think that's why at the same time, it's very important for us to protect them, from injuries as much as possible. And I think technology is one way that can be accomplished, as well as, implementing rules that are going to make the game as safe as possible while still maintaining the integrity of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say one thing. I mean, I agree with everything you guys say about how the NFL is making the game safer and stuff. And I think it's something that maybe year to year you may notice slight differences. But if you go back and watch clips from the 1970s when in the NFL, it is bananas how violent football used to be. There was a clip I saw on Twitter. It was can you believe how crazy the NFL used to be? And it was a clip. They were previewing a Sunday night game on NBC, and there was clips of guys getting flipped over and stepped on. It was ridiculous. It's crazy to see. When you see it like that, then you realize, okay, the game has gotten a lot safer. There's still lots of room to make it safer and stuff, but it's important to see, or it's very interesting to see how much safer it's gotten from the full spectrum of like the 70s to now. It's pretty interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to have helmets made of leather, so
That's
I'm glad that they upgraded from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the pads used to be a little thinner too.
Mm-hmm.
Have either
Yeah.
of you guys have any of you guys seen the movie Invincible
This is a little
about the
Wahlberg.
Eagles? Yeah, I believe. Or is that who it was?
Vince
I think
Papale.
that was it.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking
yeah.
about,
Yeah.
In that movie, he wanted to be faster, and he took the pads that he was supposed to be wearing as like a special teams guy, because he's supposed to be someone who's like making hits and stuff on people, and he actually switched them out and put on like quarterback pads, which are not as bulky, because he wanted to be faster and more like fluid. And I don't think that's recommended. I don't know if they let you do that anymore, but it was just an interesting thing that I saw from that movie, and I was like, oh damn, like that's something that could change, like where it's like all the players are going to want to be as streamlined and as fast as possible. You don't want bulky pads that are going to impact your movements and stuff like that, but at the same time you need some pads to make sure that the safety is still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can definitely see football sort of evolving and getting new ideas and technologies implemented to it, whether it be lighter, better, thinner protective gear or anything else, right? And I guess that kind of leads me to one of my last questions of the night. What are some cool features that you guys would want to see in the sport of football? What are some cool things that maybe we've seen in other sports or you've seen in a research lab somewhere, and you might want to see in action, whether it be in the NFL, the college football scene, you name it, XFL?
Did I take this one first, or Sean, did you want to?
All you.
This is the easiest thing possible. This is something I think most fans of football can agree on. Something that just angers me every week I watch football. Something that every fan of every team, I think, can get on board with. Goal line technology. Why can't you just you have these cameras in the pylons now, showing these amazing clips of guys flipping over the pylon or the ball, being over the pylon. Put a sensor in the pylon, put a sensor in the ball, and that way you can see, have a line that determines if the guy crossed the goal line or not. Same thing with the yard marker. Why can't you have a sensor in the ball, and you can determine, if the guy picked up 10 yards or if he picked up the first down or whatever. I forget, it was like 2 years ago, the game where the referee pulled out a piece of paper. Was it a piece of paper or was it a clip, paper clip?
I think it was a paper, like a flash card.
Yeah, exactly, a flash card. Oh, yes, the Cowboys Raiders game, and of course it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Him pulling out this flash card and putting it up to the between the chain and the ball. Like, this technology exists in soccer. Soccer's been using the goal line technology. It's getting better. Premier League uses it. I think the World Cup is going to use it. Why can't they just have this in football? It's not that hard with the amount of cameras and the amount of systems they already have in place to make that goal line technology a real thing, and stop playing the guessing game with the yards, because we are, as fans of football, we've all been screwed out of a first down or a touchdown or a win. Justin, you gave a good example of one where the Cowboys succeeded, but you guys have had plenty of other ones that you've complained about to me in the past. The catch and all these other things.
The catch.
The catch.
Just put the damn put the sensors in the ball and put the sensors in the yard markers and the pylons, please. That's all I ask. Number one. There's other things also, but yeah.
That's a pretty good one, Ricky.
Yeah, from my end, mine's more on the data side. I'd love to know, like, now with some of the companies that are out there, we can see how fast these guys are running and how many yards they've run on a
Yeah.
particular play. There's a lot of stats that I think are out there with regards to the offensive players. But one stat that I really like to see from the defensive side is how hard like are some of these hits that these guys are taking. Like these guys are getting. Sometimes you're watching and you're like, oh man, that guy got lit up. Like I want to know how much he got lit up. Like is it the equivalent of like getting hit by a car? Is it the equivalent of like getting like
From zero to Ray Lewis.
yeah, like there's some guys out there that are able to put on these just absolute monster hits, and I think that's something that I've never really seen quantified. Um, and I think it'd be something really cool to see.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, I would agree with Ricky honestly about like the goal analytics. I feel like that shouldn't be as much of an issue as it is still in the modern age of football. With like, did the ball cross the line or not? I still remember when the Steelers and the Ravens played like 3 years ago, and Antonio Brown was like holding the ball over the goal line, and it's like, did he get it over the line or not? And they ended up giving it to him. It was just ridiculous. Like, I wish there was a way that was
Yeah.
actually you could know for certain whether he actually crossed the line or not. So, I think for games like that, especially in the playoffs, where it comes down to like that 1 inch or that 1 yard, it's like you need to know for certain did you cross the line or not. So, I agree with Ricky totally.
Yeah, and then to pivot off of that, the replay takes so damn long. It's like, the flow of the game, you kind of, as a fan, you have to, take a pause and then you probably get a drink or go to the bathroom at that point because it takes them that long to make a decision. And it's just the goal line technology would eliminate that. Like you wouldn't
And the
have
other
to review it 50 million times from 50 million angles.
the other problem is there has to be indisputable evidence. So like if they call it not a touchdown, you need like significant proof to like overturn it. So
Mhm.
that's why I know most refs, I believe they kind of have like shifted towards like they'd rather call it a touchdown because every touchdown, every scoring play, every turnover is reviewed versus if they don't call it a touchdown, then it needs to be like actually challenged unless it's obviously within the last 2 minutes of either half.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean like the fact that like you need like because there's some situations where it's really like it could go either way. Like you could poll 100 people and it'll be 50-50 on whether they think the ball crossed or the ball didn't cross or it was a catch or it wasn't a catch. So I think if you can get technology in there that can say for sure, I think that's an obvious benefit in an obvious situation.
Yeah, agreed. Bro, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. There was some car noises, but I think that's the lesson behind today's podcast is implementing these sorts of technologies could really lend themselves to the future of this sport, to that next chapter, right? Do you guys have any other sort of last thoughts on the sport of football and what the future holds for it?
I think I would say that this conversation obviously is something that we all kind of talk about all the time. It's when Sean first came into the company, this is like the first phone call we ever had. We were talking about the same topic. Even the goal line technology. We're talking about that like for probably an hour and a half. That was my first time ever getting to know Sean or anything. We just started going on and on about this, but it's something that we're all interested in, and that's why we're so blessed to have this company and work on projects like this and find new ways to you know to help athletes to give fans a greater perspective, to correct some of the issues that we're talking about on here. That's what we're doing with our technology, and that's what I love about what we're doing. We can kind of have all these creative ideas and creative solutions, and that's what gets me up in the morning is the love of sport, the love of athlete, and just making it better all around. And I think we're doing that daily with all the work we're putting in with this company and with our technology. And can't wait to show everybody what we're working on and how it's going to change the game in a variety of ways. Some of the ways we talked about on here, and many ways that people may not even realize were possible.
Absolutely. Sean, Justin, do you guys have anything to add?
So that's a tough thing to follow up on.
I would agree.
I think I'm going to leave it at what Ricky said. I completely agree with everything he said.
Alrighty. Well, we'll call it then.
I stole your thunder.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening to yet another episode of the Built Different podcast. Today we went over the sport of football. Let us know what other sports you guys want us to cover and what other sports you might want to hear us talk about. But for now, thank you so much for listening and have a good night.
Take care, everybody.